Thanks, Jeff. Firstly, I'd like to thank everybody for connecting to this webinar. Just to follow on from Jeff's comments, I'd like to try and make this as interactive as we can. And I thought really the place to start was to pose a challenge for you. And that challenge is, how can we make feedback totally useless? So in other words, how can we create a situation where feedback is really of no value? So here's a little teaser for you. So have a look at this. Have a look at this little cartoon. And what I'd like to see, either in chat or somebody putting up their hand, is to tell us what they would do if they were had a strategy to make feedback useless. So do we have any comments? Any comments at all?
A couple of the text chat there. Stephen, if you want to...
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yep. Okay. So, all right, there's quite a lot of it coming in. So if we just have a look at some of these items, you can give too much information. That's certainly the case. You can overwhelm students. Or you can create information that's not meaningful to the student. Make it too late to make a difference. Nothing to do with the task features. I suspect what that's getting at is that it doesn't match the assessment design that was intended for this particular item of assessment. Don't give any feedback at all. For example, you see in the little cartoon there, all they've got is a mark of 5 out of 10, good work. Now that doesn't really tell anybody anything. There's a comment there, discover that students don't read it. That's more discouraging for the academic, I think, who spends a lot of time preparing feedback. So overall, if I can summarize some of these things, don't give any feedback at all. One scenario that leads to that is an overemphasis on research. If you don't give feedback, you save time, you can do more research. You give feedback that's illegible. If people can't read it, then it's of no use as feedback. Feedback that's totally unrelated to the assessment design or doesn't match the criteria if you're using criterion-based marking, or doesn't match anything in a rubric if you're using that. Perhaps feedback that's totally illogical, that's inconsistent or meaningless. Something along the lines of a comment like a few sentences should be rewritten, but not indicating what should be rewritten or any of those sorts of things. Delay feedback until after it's in fact too late for it to be useful. Often we might set an assessment task as one in a series with the objective that students would improve having feedback for the next task, but of course if we don't get the feedback to them in time, then they can't learn from that. The other aspect is that markers can have different approaches to providing feedback. So if we let them make up their own marking schemas, then perhaps they won't be able to, there mightn't be any consistency in the approach to feedback. So the question that then arises is we need to think about what we can do about this type of situation. And I'm going to present to you throughout this seminar a potential solution to these types of problems. I think the place to start would be to look at defining an E-grading workflow as part of a quality assurance process. And we can then look at what the literature has to suggest about feedback, the implications if we adopt an E-grading solution in terms of policies, the technical challenges. Then have a look at what types of solutions are out there, and then in particular this evening looking at what ReMarksPDF can offer in terms of the potential solution. So if we now move on to just considering the E-grading workflow, essentially what we've got is a need for a solution that integrates with the learning management systems that are used in universities. There's quite a lot of bespoke or one-off type E-grading solutions. but they really are not going to gain any traction unless they're integrated with the learning management system. You often see programs that are built, for example, a Mac or another program built for a PC, and even we're starting to see some that are built for iPads. But really the traction in the university context comes with defining and creating a solution that works with the learning management system. Now, as you know, there's two primary learning management systems which essentially dominate the market. There's Blackboard, and then there's Moodle. Once you get past those two systems, you start to get to smaller players like Desire to Learn, and then it goes down to really small players like Sakai. So this evening we'll be looking at ReMarks as a solution within the context of Blackboard Learn 9.1 and also Moodle 2.1. So in terms of an e-grading workflow for academics, really what you need is a situation. I'd suggest that students electronically submit their assignment solution to the learning management system. Then there's an allocation process whereby the academic in charge of the particular unit can allocate marking out to various markers. When those markers log into the system, they'll see the marking that's available to them, and then they'll conduct the marking, and then they will upload that to the repository which holds the marked up assessment. You then have a moderation process whereby the person in charge of the particular subject can look at the distributions of marks of the different markers and can adjust those as they see fit. And then ultimately you need a system to return these marked assignments to students, preferably through the learning management system, so they get an email notification that the marked assignment is there, that all of the marks are automatically transferred into Grade Centre or Gradebook in terms of the two main learning management systems, and students can go in and look at their assessment. The other aspect of this is that these marked up assessments can then be available for e-portfolio systems as well, products like Mahara. So there are other uses for these particular marked up assessments than just the initial feedback we're considering. All right, if we move on to consider the literature, there's a few things to take into account here. It's quite obvious that you need to plan assessment. So one of the initial questions you need to ask yourself is this summative for 4 marks, or is it a formative type of assessment? Are you using criterion-based marking? Are you using a rubric or not? Are you involved in a situation that has a marking team? Are you going to have a situation where assessment is going to be allocated according to tutorial groups, or is it going to be randomly assigned to different markers? And then how are you going to manage a marking team to ensure appropriate quality assurance? And whether you in fact want to engage in a pre-calibration marking exercise whereby, for example, you might have 3 markers, you take a sample of papers, you provide those papers to each of the markers, and then you see whether they in fact have a different interpretation of the meaning of the criteria you are using with respect to those particular students. And that could be a useful exercise as well to try and achieve consistency. So my first point really is that assessment needs to be planned. And I also believe that feedback's critical to improving student work and learning. So some of the issues that you're confronted with is how much feedback is appropriate, how much time do you have to actually give feedback, what form is that feedback going to take, and is there any way in which you can automate the process so that you can give more feedback with relatively less effort. So they are some of the initial challenges in looking at any sort of feedback process. Of course, you then have all sorts of overlaid policy considerations when you're talking about enterprise solutions in particular. The sorts of things that become relevant is, do your particular students have access? Do they have the necessary bandwidth? Do they have the types of computers that are needed to be able to access the feedback? Which means that you have to be able to give your feedback in a form that's easily observed in using different types of computers. There are also staff access requirements. Typically we find with universities that the people who are marking assessment can range from third-year students. I've seen marking assessments in some universities, through to casual people who are hired specifically for marking, right through to the professors that are teaching the actual unit. So we need to be able to have a solution that caters for all of these different types of people and the roles that they occupy and the likely equipment that they have, given that some of them could be marking in internet cafes, they could be marking with their own particular computers, etc. So there are issues that impact on assessment policy, retention, records retention, for example, is another major issue. There's legislative requirements in Australia that you have to maintain assessment for certain periods of the time. One of the traditional problems we have at the moment with handwritten assessment is that you can actually make your comments in writing on the assessment, then you give it back to the students. You don't have anything left other than the mark, or perhaps if you created a separate feedback sheet, that's all you've got. If a student then wants to appeal their assessment, you have to get a copy of their assessment back if you're using a printed solution. So electronic mechanisms such as ReMarks, which we'll be looking at today, provide solutions to these types of problems. So if we move ahead then and start to think about some of the technical issues that are involved with dealing with this type of scenario, at the core of it is to understand what the hardware and software requirements are and the specifications that the university in particular has adopted to roll out an e-marking type solution. A central aspect of this is the requirement that it be able to integrate with a learning management system. Similarly, the ability to actually link in with data matching systems like Turnitin, or Urkund is another one from the Netherlands, or SaferSign if you're using that solution from Blackboard. There are security issues. You don't want a situation whereby students can hack into your marking solution and change grades. So you need to have a fairly robust security system. There needs to be standards compliance so that what you're producing can be maintained. And in this respect, things like PDF are a very good standard for maintaining records into the future. Then there are considerations involving allocation and marking. How do you handle group submissions if in fact you've got a situation where a marker is going to mark their tutorial group, or even a situation where several members or several students form a group and they put in one submission representing the output of those several students. Then there's issues of moderation and return. So all of these things essentially involve strategic decisions by the university. The next layer out from that is the actual implementation of a solution. It involves training of staff, both casual staff and also full-time staff, and it also involves making sure that the feedback that you're providing actually suits what students want. So, what then are some of the challenges? I thought I might put up a slide and ask you, what does this represent? So have a look at this slide. This I think is the first challenge of the e-assessment. Whom do you think is at the bottom of this pile? A pile of paper. Can we have some suggestions? Jeff, my desk every day. Yes, I can understand that. The assessor. All right. So in my perspective, it is in fact the assessor. It probably represents all of us at some stage. If we don't have an electronic solution, or worse still, if we do have an electronic solution and we actually print out everything, which is quite common. We can see situations where students e-submit and then universities print out everything and give it to academics to mark their comments up and then return it to the students either through posting it or handing it back. And I see Kristen said there that students feel like this too. I think that's right. We can, in fact, over-assess. So one of the problems we've got really is the academic mindset and perceptions and how they manage their workloads. If I move on to the next slide, I'd like you to look at this one. So, is this the future, do you think? Is this what managing electronic submissions or having a paperless system is going to look like? Well, Jim says hell no. So, Jim, can you elaborate on that? What do you think the electronic solution is going to look like? Okay, so we've had a few comments saying that it should be an iPad out in the sun. I would agree that I think having a mobile solution enabling marking on and offline would be an effective approach. That may involve an iPad, but not necessarily. It may involve something like a laptop or some sort of portable device. So I think in the university context, we've got a situation where academics have all sorts of machines. Some are Macs, some are PCs, some are desktops, some are laptops, some are iPads. That's just for academics working in the university. And then you've got the casual staff. You don't know necessarily what types of machine they have. So whatever the solution that's going to be proposed, I think has to be very flexible, and I think it also has to enable portability, or at least cover as many possible options as is required. Kirsten makes a good point there. Access to high-speed internet is very important. When you're looking at electronic assessments, I'm typically seeing file sizes in the range of between 1 and 2 megabytes, but usually. Sometimes smaller, sometimes larger, depending on how many images are there. But access to broadband really is an important requirement. If you don't have broadband access, it does affect the types of annotations or types of feedback that you can provide. Now, you'd be well aware that having, for example, video commentary will take up enormous amounts of bandwidth. Having audio commentary can as well, unless you have control over the kilohertz recording rates. Other than that, you're then starting to look at text-based and also image-based commentary, which take up less bandwidth. So bandwidth is an issue. In relation to video, Matt makes a good point there that files can be streamed, and that's certainly the approach that ReMarks takes in relation to video, and you also have that option in relation to audio. But in respect of audio, you can also embed it within a PDF. All right, look, we'll move on and have a look at the next slide. And I'd like you to think about this. What do you think this depicts? What do we have here? Okay, so we're getting some comments now. So what we have is a desk that is full of technology, although looking at some of it, it's aged. And then we have an academic, if I can put it that way, who is hiding under the desk, resorting back to a traditional marking means. Now, one way of looking at this is that this is a response to low technological literacy, that an academic, well, power cut's a good one, but it may be that they are just not comfortable with the modern technology that they have, and they're resorting back to what they're used to. So there's a few issues there. Iris makes a point that the staff may prefer to read offline. Text reads differently in hard copy, and that complex assignments and across many pages, and really it does depict somebody who needs help in dealing with the technology. And really, this person is going to confront a world fairly soon where they won't have this choice. And I say that with knowledge that both in Australia and overseas, we are seeing universities who are mandating electronic assessment and not offering the choice to academics anymore. And that's occurring simply on a cost-benefit analysis from the university's perspective. And that's another issue we'll touch on a little bit later. I'll move on to the next slide for another issue. Now this is a workplace health and safety slide. So basically this is also something that we need to take into account when you're shifting to electronic marking. The more time you spend in front of the computer and even in an iPad or portable device, you need to be conscious that it does change the way in which you traditionally may mark. So that's something to bear in mind as well. Okay. The next slide is an important one, and really it's looking at the issue of change, because that's what we're confronted with here. If electronic marking is going to be successful, it has to be implemented in the context of a change. So let's have a think about this. This cycle of change here is really presenting different perspectives. So it starts off, something is up. So if you realize something's up, electronic marking, well, don't look ahead. I'm not interested. I don't want to do it. Then somebody says, it's electronic marking. Well, don't put a name on it. As soon as you name it, it starts to become more important. Then somebody asks the question, well, what do I need to do to implement this? Then the next point of resistance is, well, we shouldn't plan to do this. We should just adopt the Mahatma Gandhi approach and sit there and do nothing, which is really the next phase. We don't begin. You have somebody who might say, well, I'm going to do this, but no, I'm not going to adjust. I don't begin. Somebody says, I'm able to do it, but they never quite make the adjustment. And then I got through it. What's next? Well, there isn't anything next. I don't want to do anything further. So this is just a depiction of resistance to change. And like any change, electronic marking is going to require a change in mindset. It's going to require training, and it's going to require support. And there really needs to be made a good case as to why this is something that's worthwhile pursuing. Okay, well, let's move on a little bit and just have a quick look at some of the existing solutions. Now, these solutions, most of them are enterprise-based solutions, although I have put in some other ones. I mean, there are hundreds of other minor solutions as well. But essentially what you've got is the learning management systems themselves. So you've got in the center there, effectively you've got Moodle, Desire to Learn, and Blackboard, the main players. Each of those systems has basic rubric marking systems embedded within them, but with fairly limited functionality in terms of what academics can do. You then have other players, like, for example, Turnitin's GradeMark. So they're building on their data matching system, and they are also linking in to the learning management system, so that there are APIs into Moodle, Desire to Learn, and into Blackboard coming from that quarter. You then have solutions which aren't linked into learning management systems, and these ones are things like track changes in Word, which many people use. You then have products like Adobe Acrobat Professional, again, which enable annotations to be made on PDF documents, and there's a variety of those types of PDF editors. Then you've got ReMarks, which we'll spend some time on today. ReMarks does link into the learning management systems with respect to Moodle and Blackboard. It is a PDF editor like Adobe Acrobat Professional, but it has a complete workflow for electronic marking. In respect of Moodle, it also links into products like Turnitin and Urkund in terms of data matching. Okay, so they're the main sorts of solutions. I do emphasize there are lots of other little ones, but they're the main ones. If we move on and think about, well, what in fact do we want as a solution? Coming back the other way, what sort of functionality do we want to have in an e-grading system? So I might just put that question up for people to respond to. If you're designing or if you're seeking to have an e-grading solution, what exactly do you want to have? What sort of functionality do you want to have in that system? So what do people think about that? Effective and efficient, something that saves time, really simple interface, easy to use. Okay, other people? Intuitive, system-wide, encourages good feedback, caters for assessment workflow, easy for students to understand, works with non-text assignments. Now Russell, that point about non-text assignments is a really important one. Can I give an example? Say it's a visual work. In my area, which is law, it might be a moot or an argument. In music, it might be somebody playing music. It might be a film. Well, how would it work with non-text assignments? In that respect, what I think you would do would be to create a rubric, and you would actually view the performance that you would mark in respect of a rubric, which would be a text record of what's happening. So, in fact, you do have you need to record the results in a text system, at least with the marks as well, to get it back into the learning management systems. But if it's a film, then you might have to shift to other types of situations where you can mark up comment on film, for example, and those things are around. What I'd suggest, if I may, is I think it's particularly important to have both online and offline grading. I think being tethered to the internet all the time is a bit limiting. I think it's important to have mobility so that you can mark wherever you want. I think someone earlier mentioned at the beach or at home. I think LMS integration is essential. You need to be able to bulk upload and download assignments. You need to be able to ESA them and return them, and you need to be able to have marks automatically going into the learning management system, just to avoid the hassle of transposing grades and marks where errors arise. It has to be efficient. It must have an efficient workflow. That's absolutely essential. I think it does need to have the ability to integrate with data matching systems. It depends on how you use the data matching systems, whether they're intended to be punitive, which I don't think is the main reason people use them, or alternative, they're used in an educative sense to encourage students to appropriately cite references and so forth. The other aspect of this is the ability to run on a wide variety of devices. It's no good having an iPad solution and that's your solution when most of the people in the university or casually don't necessarily have an iPad. And you need to cater for those differences in technologies. So device independence, as Russell's suggesting, is important. Seamless authentication is also, Jim, that's a very good point to raise as well. One of the issues with ReMarks is the importance of security. And as you'll see, it has several layers of security. One of them is a token device, which, for example, if somebody steals a laptop computer with ReMarks on it, then you can remotely shut that down in terms of preventing people accessing grading. So the other aspect of this is that you only really want to have a situation where students electronically submit once. You can't have multiple submission points. So there's some examples. There's some good comments coming through of different sorts of issues. What I thought I might do now is actually show you the Remarks solution and to get some feedback from you. So basically, Remarks is a PDF editor. It's designed for academics to annotate, to collaborate and report on student assessment submissions, and it is a complete e-grading solution which is integrated with both Blackboard and with Moodle. The actual image I've got there at the moment is one that's really showing, I think, too much annotation, but it's just to give you an example. So you can see here within this the screen that you can in fact handwrite using the pen tool in Remarks, and if you've got a tablet with handwriting recognition, it will convert that into text. You can see that you have stamps if you like using stamps. You have color coding and color coding keys if you want to use that. You have automatic calculations of marks so that you don't have to add them up yourself. You've got some very useful drag and drop graphs which show students' level of achievement relative to everyone else. And then you've got the annotations also appearing in side columns, just as it does with track changes in Word. Now, we've got some comments coming through. Let me show how it's integrated with Moodle. Yes, I will. So what I'll do now is to actually move on to show you what the integrations look like. But just bear in mind at this point that Remarks can enable marking on and offline. You can have fairly elaborate and interactive rubrics. It enables criterion-based grading as well as grading that doesn't have any criteria at all. And it has a very extensive collection of annotation features and very strong moderation capabilities, which I'll show you. So if I move along and we start to go through this e-grading workflow, which I showed you earlier. So here we have then Blackboard 9.1. This is just showing you in Blackboard 9.1 that we've got several roles. We can see here we have an instructor. I happen to be the instructor for this particular unit. We have 2 markers, and then we have a whole pile of students, which is not an uncommon sort of scenario. All right, so what we do in Blackboard 9.1, we just create a standard assignment. So it's no different from any other assignment. We then, the equivalent in Moodle is we create a Remarks activity. So we're creating a Remarks assignment within Moodle. This is Moodle 2.1. Shifting back to Blackboard, we have this situation where a student is going to electronically submit their response to the assignment. Now, one thing to bear in mind with Remarks is that it is a PDF editor. So students need to be able to submit a PDF. Now, that's not a difficult thing to do these days. Most students can cope with that. They certainly get used to it once they've used Remarks once. If by chance they submit a Word file, then what will happen is that Remarks will reject that and they'll get an email notifying them that they need to submit a PDF. Okay, I'm just having a look at some of these questions. Okay, do we need marks associated with numeric score for calculating? If you're going, you don't need to use marks at all. If you're going to use some of the devices such as smart graphs and charts, then you do need to use numeric scores for the calculation of those things. But I'll show you that as we go through. In terms of automatic conversions of PDF, there's plenty of products out there that universities can use for students to electronically convert their assignments into PDFs. Word will do it. You can submit. A student can submit to a site, plenty of sites on the internet which will return a PDF, and you can even build it in as part of the workflow for assignment submissions if you want to. In terms of PDFs usage, I know at UNE we required students to submit by PDF, and it really didn't create that much of a problem. We had students who were mostly mature age as well as school leaders, so I'm not sure the issue of PDF is necessarily that significant. Anyway, look, I'll keep going. So what happens when a student electronically submits in Blackboard? Then they will get this back, which essentially, when they look at their submission history, it will show the file that they submitted. At this point, they actually wouldn't get this last little bit, which is the instructor feedback. They would get up to that point and above in terms of their submission history. Okay. So you can then, within Blackboard, you can go in and you can have a look at the file that they've submitted if you want to, just as you would with any other assessment submission. In terms of e-submission in Moodle, then the student would electronically submit, and this is what the typical, well, a version of Moodle would look like in terms of when they submitted things or the process of submission. In terms of remarks, you then have this situation. It had to be blacked out at the moment because that's an authentication code to a particular university, but you do need to authenticate with a token into remarks, and that, as I mentioned earlier, was a security measure to enable individual machines to be shut down if there's a security breach. It is a little bit of a hassle, but you can manage it, and for the security benefits of it, it's worth doing. And this is the same on Blackboard as well as Moodle. Okay, what we've got in front of us now is marking allocation within Remarks. So you remember, once the students have been submitted, it then becomes a question of allocating the marking out to the various markers. So within Remarks, you have a database panel. So you would click on database and it opens up this panel. Within the panel itself, you can see that there is a color coding system. So students that are color coded in red haven't e-submitted. So these are students who are recognized as being enrolled in the unit, and this enrollment is coming via Blackboard, or in the case of Moodle, it's exactly the same. It's coming from a learning management system. You know which students have submitted and which ones haven't submitted. What you can do is you can select one or more students, and then you can go into allocate, and you can allocate these students to various markers. Or you can allocate them according to groups, if you've set up groups in either Blackboard or Moodle. Or you can allocate them, as I said, to individual markers. If by chance one of the markers, say Anne Black here, becomes sick, so we initially allocated some marking to Anne, but she became sick, and we need to reallocate, well, you can do that within Remarks. So what that's effectively doing is that this allocation is assigning particular students marking to individual students. Okay. You then get an allocation confirmation. So in this particular case, we've only allocated one student, as indicated by that row, to, in this case, myself, who happened to be the unit coordinator or the instructor in Blackboard for this. So when I log in, essentially as a marker, then I will only see the thing that the students have been allocated to me. If I then click on that particular student, it then opens up their paper. So the PDF paper opens, and then it's available for marking for that, by that particular marker to whom it was allocated. As is pointed out there's lots of information and training films and various things at the Remarks PDF website, which I can show you a little bit later. Okay, in terms of marking, essentially you then apply annotations to the PDF. These annotations are then saved, and when you upload those annotations back to the server, all those annotations go back to the server, and the version in the server is incremented It is possible to allocate the same document to multiple markers who, for example, are marking different questions within the same PDF, and all of those separate markers, annotations, are all combined and uploaded to the server and combined into a master PDF, which is incremented. So marking takes place, and I'll show you all the marking tools in a moment. Do you have to allocate when there's only one person marking? It depends what role you have. If you're the person in charge of the subject, then you've essentially got all of the marking available to you. You don't have to allocate. You would just download the student papers and they'll be available for you on your machine, and you can mark on and offline. If you happen to use another computer somewhere else, you can also download them to that, and then eventually you will upload them back to the server. Okay. Now, in terms of Moodle, Turnitin, and ReMarks, there is an integration. So what I've done here is just to show you in the Moodle version, and we're working on this at the moment to add this into the Blackboard version, but you'll see that the similarity index is displayed as a column within the ReMarks database. I've created an expanded view of this over here. So you can see here that this particular student, Benjamin Lawn, has a 100% similarity index, which is a bit of a problem, hence its red shading. So that's a student you definitely want to have a look at. So what you would do is then double-click on this similarity index percentage, and it will open up Turnitin or Urkund if you're using that system in a separate browser window, so you can have a look at why this particular student has got this horrendous similarity percentage. Okay, Matt's asked, does the student and class information needed to be added to ReMarks manually? No, it comes from the LMS automatically. Okay, moving on. Once you've done your marking, then you have selective release. So you can release the particular papers, all of them or some of them, to particular students. And it just gives you a warning there that you're about to release it, because once it's released, you're making it available to the students. And they get an email confirming that it's available, and all of the particular marks gets transferred to Grade Center or Grade Book. So you need to think about the release stage before you do it. In the actual database, you'll see then it indicates that the status is now released, who the marker was, when it was submitted, when it was released. It is possible to go back, and for example, if there's an appeal, if there's a particular appeal, then you can actually get a fresh version of the assignment sent to a second marker. And you're then, when that marking comes back, you're in a position to compare the two different markers and make a decision as to which way you're going from, or which one you're going to adopt. Okay, the mark then goes into Grade Center. In this case, you can see that particular student, the mark's gone into Grade Center, and same with Moodle into Grade Book, I think it is. Students can then view their marked assessment. This is Blackboard. Remember, I showed you this earlier, but what's now added is this, so that they can actually open up their original PDF and they can open up the one that's marked. Okay, that's just when the students opened up the assignment and it shows them the annotation. Okay, now some issues. I see there was a comment about Lightbook. There's quite a lot of difference between what ReMarks does and what Lightbook does, and you'll see that with the functionality. So we'll just run through this. Okay, I'll just skip this slide. It's just a summary of what we're going to look at now. So there's fairly advanced PDF functionality. It's got quite a lot of the features you see in products like Adobe Acrobat Professional. You can turn on and off particular markers' annotations, and you can encrypt them as visible or invisible. There are smart charts and graphs which you can drag and drop in. That, for example, this one here is a grading schema showing students the breakdown of all marks according to the different grading scale that whatever grading scale you've adopted, and you can change grading scales and set whatever you want. There's histograms. There's things like radar plots. In this particular one, you're showing the student's level of achievement in red. The green shows the average of all other students on each and every criteria that you're using. And students really find this quite useful. They like to know how they're performing relative to other students. And these are the sorts of things you can't really easily do if you've got a paper-based system or if you don't maintain a fairly good quality database associated with your marking. Okay, moving on. There are text, audio, and video annotations. So you can, in the case of audio here, you can record sounds, sound-based commentaries, and you can, in fact, save them as sounds. And so if the same error is, or the same comment is repeating itself in one student assignment after another, you record once and insert many times. There's a frequency column which enables you to sort these comments in terms of the frequency for which they're appearing. And that's quite a useful feature. There's text-based ones as well, which I'll show a little bit later in more detail. And there's also video-based ones. Now, the video-based ones are a pointer to where the video is stored on the web or on a streaming video server. I don't embed video within PDFs because they become unmanageable in terms of file sizes. So what I'm embedding is a pointer, which if a student clicks, will open up and play the video, which you have stored in a separate location. ReMarks does embed sound. Okay. So I move on. This is auto text. Auto text is a very useful feature. So what you can do, for example, in my discipline in law, I typically write quite lengthy answer guides for student assignments. I can then break them up and make them comments. I can then insert those comments by clicking on this little icon here, which embeds the comments. I can edit the comment and alter it if I want to. You can also create comments and have all of the formatting features of Word. So, for example, if you have a comment that's in the form of a table in Word, you can copy that and paste it in here, and the table formatting will appear in this side column. And you can adjust the width of this side column as well to accommodate tables and other types of annotations. Ross, you've asked, can you point to a point in Moodle, in Blackboard? I'm not sure what you mean by that. What do you mean? You might have to explain that a little bit for me while I just continue on. Sounds I've covered, so you can record a sound. You can include URLs, that's quite correct. You can embed hyperlinks in any annotation, so you can hyperlink within a document to documents in a series or to anywhere on the web. So it has hypertext linking and URLs. There's text and drawing tools, so you can draw and do various things. There's handwriting and pen tools. I'm not much good at drawing Picasso, but anyway, it's just to illustrate that you can write. So if you've got a tablet PC with a stylus, you can write very easily using ReMarks with 1028 levels of sensitivity. There's lots of embedded stamps within ReMarks. Stamps are quite useful. I sometimes include these little smileys. I did some research on this. Students do find them useful, although not as useful as other forms of annotations. I think the best example of a really useful annotation is in the accountancy area. I sometimes mark trust accounting assignments. So I actually capture a correct page of accounting, if I can put it that way, as a stamp. And if I find a student has really mucked up their accounting, instead of going through and laboriously changing and fixing up all their individual mistakes, I insert a blank page into the PDF and paste the corrected accounting as a annotation. So that's quite a useful thing to do. Cover sheets, there's a few ways of handling cover sheets. You can create a cover sheet as a cover page, which I'll show you now. So that was good timing. So in this particular example, I actually created a rubric in Word, and I saved it as a PDF and then made it a cover page. So it's a bit like the cover page feature in Microsoft Word. So you can drag this into the student's assignment and it will put that cover page or end page at the end into their assignment. So you could include barcodes and things if you wanted to as well. Or you might, as part of the submission process, depending if your university wants to set it up or do the programming, you could actually automatically insert cover pages. Okay. Marks, criteria, and comments. You can use criterion-based marking without a rubric. So you would use mark tools, which I can show you in a minute, to actually set up a set of criteria, and when you're marking, you might make a comment, you'll link a mark to a particular criteria. That criteria then appears in the mark tally. So you're linking annotations, marks, criteria, and a tally together. And you can do that with any annotation. This is setting up criterion-based marking using the mark tool. So basically, you're specifying a particular unit, a particular item of assessment, because you can have libraries of these things and you can share them with other people and you can save them and reuse them. You set up your criteria, you specify marks. You don't have to use marks, but if you are, you specify them. And then if you want to, you can then set that as active, as being the active criteria that you're using to mark a particular item of assessment. So that's criterion-based marking just without a rubric. If you want to use a rubric, you can set up a rubric. So essentially, you would click on the rubric button. It then opens up this panel, and you can create all sorts of rubrics. You can create holistic analytic rubrics. You can create rubrics that have tick boxes. You can have rubrics that have hypertext links in them. You can have rubrics that auto-shade. There's quite elaborate designs can be made with the rubric system. So you create a master rubric in this column, which you then would insert into the student document. So once it's inserted into the student document, it appears in their PDF. You can then, if you want to, open up that rubric and you can tick marks, and you can see here it is automatically calculating what that particular tick box means in terms of the marks. Alternatively, you don't even have to open up the rubric. You can click automatic shading and automatic ticking. So what you would do is you would insert the master rubric. It then becomes a document rubric inserted in the student's PDF. You then just ignore the rubric and you start marking. So you insert a comment. You might have a mark of 5, which you link to a particular criteria, in this case criteria number 1. So criteria number 1, that then resulted in this tick box and automatic shading happening. Okay, so then we've got here, what have we got? Can you import your rubric from Blackboard, or do we need to recreate them? No, you can't import them from Blackboard at this point. I haven't investigated the coding that comes out of Blackboard to do that. So generally you would recreate them within ReMarks, but you can save them in these libraries that you can see here. You can then export them and share them with other markers. How long does it take to create a rubric? Not that long. I can show you how to create one if we have time. Just running through quickly the last thing. Style libraries. This is an English language style library. These are types of commentary that are applicable across multiple items of assessment. So ReMarks comes with the Commonwealth Style Guide embedded in it, a little book of style. So if you have particular standard comments, you can just select them and embed them. And you get these little starred annotations. You can edit these if they don't quite suit the particular student, close but not quite. And you can even build and edit your own libraries. And here's a good example, actually, of the hypertext linking. So in relation to a style library, we've selected some text and we've clicked the hypertext button, which has opened up this, which enables you to link to pages, to the web, etc. Style libraries are really useful in terms of providing feedback you can use for multiple items of assessment. I've seen universities build style libraries in multiple languages. For example, the comments are both in English and Chinese. So you can actually use multiple languages with this. ReMarks out of the box supports 7 languages, including modern and traditional Chinese, Arabic, French, Spanish, 2 versions of English. If you want to add other languages, you can quite easily. There has been some suggestions of adding some Aboriginal languages. So anyway, there's some choices there. Okay. Can you create styles after you've marked the first assessment? Absolutely. You can create styles whenever you want to. Efficiency improvements for the library. Any research on that? No, Connie, nobody's done that yet. We really need to do some research along those lines. I've done some research which I've put on the website, but this has really been focused on what students think about ReMarks. So I'll show you that in a minute. So smart charts and multiple views. Smart charts we've covered. Multiple views, you can have many PDFs open simultaneously. You can have a split view, so you have the same PDF open in 2 points, and you can view them multiple ways. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you view PDFs. You can do color coding, which I find very useful. Instead of saying this comment is excellent every time you see something, or it's poor or needs improvement, you just define a series of colors to mean those things, and you just highlight what those colors mean, and you insert a color key. And so the student knows what the colors mean, and it's quite an effective way. All these colors, by the way, are approved for colorblind people. You can expand the color gamuts with this if you want to. You can go to 256 colors. You can have just black and white shades of grey if you think people are going to print these things out. I generally have it set by default on colors for people with color blindness. Can you have multiple students' papers open at once? Absolutely. You can have quite a number of them open at once. Okay. Shareable content serve to increase consistency across marking. Yes. What you would do, I think, as a marking, as somebody who's the unit instructor or coordinator, you would actually define your rubric or criterion-based marking. You may, in fact, create a series of auto comments or audio comments, and you create something called a share file, which is automatically sent out to your markers and embedded in their system so that their marking setup is exactly the same as yours. It doesn't integrate with the desire to learn. No, it doesn't integrate with the desire to learn because desire to learn, although they have released Valence, which is their API system, they haven't released an API system with enough APIs to let us actually integrate with them as at this point. They indicate that they will be expanding their APIs later on this year, so maybe possibly later in the year, but at this current point in time with Valence, the answer to that question is unfortunately no, not yet. Okay, automatic mark addition, it adds up the marks for you broken down by criteria, as you can see there. Moderation, I just wanted to mention this briefly. Moderation is a very strong feature of ReMarks. In this particular case, it's based on some sandpit files which you can look at on the ReMarks website, and you can download. You can actually download a version of ReMarks and play around with it, and you can in fact use the sandpit files as well. This is one of the worst case scenarios for marking. We've got 3 separate markers. We've got, and they're all actually looking at the same question. One is bimodal, the blue one. One is negatively skewed, the greenish coloured one, and one is positively skewed, the reddish coloured one. If we looked at that as a total distribution, it would probably look relatively normalish, not quite, but you mightn't be worried. But when you actually look at the underlying patterns, you have a major problem because you have 3 different markers looking at the same student papers coming to completely different approaches. In terms of in terms of that being a practice for quality assurance, it's disastrous. You need to do something about that. Pre-calibration marking would help with that. Otherwise, you've got to engage in a moderation process. You can click on a column, you can click on any of these rows here, and it will give you, in this little box here that's currently shaded, a list of those students. Click on the student, it'll open up their paper, and you can moderate in the paper, or you can moderate in other ways as well. So it has actually very strong moderation features. Here is another way of moderating. So you can actually select particular students. So in this case, we've selected a particular student, and we're going to increase their mark or their percentage, and that will shift them, in this particular case, probably from a distinction level at 81% to a high distinction if we wanted to do that. So you can shift parts of distributions if you want to, whole distributions if you want to. But I tend to look at focus on individual students, particularly near borderlines, or if there's a major problem with the interpretation of different markers. Can a moderator see transitions in real time? You can, as long as the markers are uploading their marking to the server, you can actually see the current state of progress in marking, and you will see the transitions. Although you won't have like a time-lapse situation seeing changes in graphs over time, but you will see the current status of the graphs at the point that you create them or you get the information from the server. Fully customizable. This current setup in terms of the types of annotations that you can do, it's only a subset of what Remarks can do. Quite a lot of it is turned off. It was done this way to try and minimize the complexity to a basic set of marking tools. As people become more accustomed to it, they can add in more tools. So what do students think about this? These are studies that I've conducted with law students. You can see the numbers there in terms of the number of students. They're quite low numbers, but it does give you a view for what they think. Generally, the impression of students is very positive because, firstly, they can actually read the feedback. They get it back electronically, so in the case of universities that still post things back, it saves a lot of time. They get feedback more quickly, or quicker than they would otherwise. And they think the annotations are a very good value. And I've got research papers you can look at on the website in relation to this. Okay, then we've got a question here, and does this then upload all marked files automatically? It doesn't upload them automatically. You make a decision as to when you upload them, and you select which ones you want to upload. Does it batch upload? You can batch upload, yes. No, not one paper at a time. You can do one paper at a time if you can, but no, you batch upload, which I think is something that you can't do with some of the other systems at this moment. Connie's asked in terms of an iPad. There is another company or another person who's got an iPad version that will link in and work with Remarks. So that will be available soon for testing. No Android versions at this point. No, that would stretch our resources to stretch our resources too thin. I'm afraid at this point. So basically, what we tend to cover is desktops, laptops, mobile computers such as tablet PCs, and things like the iPad as well. How about large classes? Certainly, we've tested this with, in terms of around about 2,000 students with file sizes around about, I think, 1 to 2 megabytes in size, and it caters for that. It's designed to have, it's designed to have up to, I think, about 40 different markers, so you can manage that. Okay. So what do we got here? Tablet PCs, Windows 8 or laptops. It's Windows 8. It works with Windows 7. I think it works with Windows 8, Linux, and Mac. Various versions of Mac, right up to the latest version, which is Mountain Lion. Okay. Now, so conclusions. So I just want to make a couple of points. E-grading feedback systems enable new types of feedback and analytics. Those types of charts and graphs, which you would normally not be able to produce easily, can be embedded. I think it's important to look at the workflow and the processes in terms of academics and students in terms of how do they use it. Only easy to use and efficient systems are going to survive, so ease of use is important. Most current choices have functional deficiencies. I think Remarks at this point is probably, well, I'm biased, I suppose, but I think it's probably the best solution that is currently available. I think e-grading is inevitable, and so I think what you're going to see is that cost savings are going to drive its adoption. If you think about all the costs of marking by traditional methods, in terms of the cost of paper and moving things around, entering things into systems, there's cost savings involved. Now, we can provide screenshots of MarkPad, which is the iPad version. If you're interested in that, I'd suggest that if you are, send me an email, and you can get my email off the website. I can show that. So that's in relation to questions. What I thought I might do. Russell says cost savings depend on the level of resistance from markers. That's quite correct, Russell. But we're finding a situation where some of the unis are mandating it, rightly or wrongly. I think what needs to happen is that you have a typical cycle of early adopters who then look at the whole sort of process. In terms of Cheryl's, her experience just thinks it takes longer than paper-based marking. It really depends on whether you've set up the workflow to be efficient or not, and how confident you are with the tools. So I'm not sure that's necessarily going to be the reflection of everybody. Can it handle marking and annotation of video and audio files? Yes. Oh, okay, first time marking assignment, I can understand. These things do take time to get used to. The dollar question, essentially it's marketed to universities as a site license, and it depends on the FSL required. So what I generally do is talk to the particular university as to what they want to do. In terms of usability, I think the easiest way is if I actually just zip over here for a second, hopefully. What I'm showing you is ReMarks. So just quickly, there was, in terms of these tools, you can, if we go into a particular database, if I go to those sandpit files, what it's doing is that you can see it's quickly linked to those files. I think most of these are marked, so hence they've, yeah, they're all marked. But anyway, I'll open up one. So you can see how quickly that is that I opened it. This has just got some dummy data in it that was useful for generating moderation, but I can come in here and I can easily annotate things. Oh, don't want that. And what I can do, so I can select this and I can allocate this because it's got criterion associated with it. I can allocate marks and criteria, and I can add comments if I want to, etc. So I didn't allocate a mark, but I've allocated a comment, and it's embedded in the side column. And I can put ticks and all those sorts of things. If I want to do the pencil tool, I can, I can draw with a mouse. If I had a stylus, it would be better. I can change color coding and all the rest of it. You can see the database there. It's what it would do if you've got web-based collections, it would list them. At the moment, it's connected to various universities, and I can click on there and it would show linked files. So it's quite easy to do. These things are detachable, so I could detach this database and put it somewhere else on my screen. If I just close the database for a moment, and if I look at something like style, I can look at the English. This one's got Chinese in it. So you can see here, if I insert that particular annotation, you see it's been inserted. You can see it's a mixture of English and Chinese, and it's got the URLs. We click on that, it would open up the connections. So, I mean, you can edit and create these style libraries very, very easily. In terms of moderation, so I'm just skipping over here. You can see here, you can moderate right down to the criterion level if you want to. You can look at individual criterion, combinations of criteria, permutation combination criteria, questions and markers. So in this particular case, we've got marker 1 is the red one. If we want to look at the 8 students represented by 45%, we can. We can go in here, we can sort them. So if people are near borderlines, we can open up that particular student's paper and make a decision as to whether they should be pushed over to the next achievement level. So instead of fumbling around trying to find particular student's assessment, it's all available. You can easily bring it up. In terms of this particular marker, we can compare marker 1 to marker 2. If we wanted to add some more details, we can have 30 or more of these markers. 30, I think, is the maximum at the moment. We can select the marker and we can put their charts in, and we can look at the distributions relatively easily. So it's quite easy to use once you get the hang of the basic structure of it. So I just really wanted to show you that so you can get an idea of how it works. The best way to do it is to download it and have a play around with it yourself. If you want to, for example, if you teach another language such as German or what have you, you can go into ReMarks preferences. You can come along here to language. You can choose the language you want, and it'll change all of these settings to the language that you're looking at. You can change the color gamuts if you want. There's all sorts of general settings. For example, the side column areas here can be broadened or narrowed, and various things. I won't go through all of them. I just really wanted to give you an impression of how much flexibility there is within the particular tool. Okay, now I'll just get out of this. and just go back to here. And I'll just see what we've got here. Is it cheaper to implement and maintain and support than Turnitin GradeMark? And will the price scale up as we adopt it gradually? Is it cheaper to implement and maintain? Well, the actual product is maintained by ReMarks. You have to do a cost-benefit analysis with the Turnitin product, because the Turnitin product, GradeMark, has a much smaller feature set, and it also doesn't enable you at the moment, I think, to mark offline. It doesn't have sound annotations. It doesn't have a whole lot of features. So I think really that we'd have to discuss that offline. It's a sort of an involved area. In terms of licensing, it could be licensed to subsets of the university, I suppose. That can be sort of discussed. Okay, if the students get multiple assignments, can ReMarks help to calculate the overall grade and help provide student feedback? So if you have a series of assignments, basically you would have them as separate assignments in the learning management system. You'd mark each one as they occur. The marks would be uploaded into the learning management system, and all of the marks are maintained in Gradebook or Grade Center. ReMarks won't show you the combined marks across multiple assignments. Really, that's a job for Grade Center and the LMS. But it will enable you to mark each assignment to put those grades into the LMS. Can a user install on multiple machines? The answer is yes. You can have it on multiple machines, and you can go from one to the other. The only thing you need to do is make sure you've uploaded your marked assignment to make sure you've got the latest version on the server. I'm not sure what you mean by GradeMark online. With ReMarks, you can mark online and offline. You don't have to be tethered to the internet all the time. An assignment you can't continue on another machine. You can if you uploaded the marked assignment to the server and then downloaded it on the other machine. You could continue marking. Okay, sorry. Please scroll up for other questions or Turnitin integrations from a few of us. Okay, where we're at with Turnitin integration, we've got the Turnitin integration in relation to Moodle. We're now looking at the Turnitin integration in relation to Blackboard. Our estimate is it's a 2-week project, and we're now getting quotes on having that produced. So I don't think that's very far off at the moment at all. The other issue there is that with Blackboard there are workarounds, even for those unis, for example, using Safe Assign, such as Griffith. They use ReMarks. They've been testing ReMarks while they use Safe Assign. And you can use ReMarks with context of the university with Turnitin, and that's certainly the case with UQ at the moment, who've been trialling it as well. Have you tried to integrate ReMarks with Moodle? Absolutely, it's already integrated with Moodle 2.1. Okay, all right. Are there any other questions?
Okay, Stephen, I might just jump in here for a sec. First of all, to just say thank you very much. You can tell from the number of questions that have been there and the engagement with the participants that this has been a very interesting presentation. People have got lots and lots of questions. So first of all, I just want to thank you for your time tonight. Also, I think you did an absolutely great job as a presenter to be able to present and keep track of a lot of the text questions. I mean, I think you did a sterling job there, so thanks very much for doing that. And certainly the level of, the questions that people are asking really let us know that people are interested in this whole area. So I just want to say that first, Stephen, so thanks very much for your time. I'm not going to cut people off because I know people have still got a few questions, but I also just want to make sure that we don't keep you up all night here, Stephen. We have used up a fair bit of your time, so we'll probably stay on just for a couple more minutes for people with some questions. But I just wanted to make sure we got to thank you before a lot of people started leaving. Now, Matthew has also just put up the URL to the feedback. So we have the feedback survey here. So if people keep typing in, of course, that's going to disappear off your screen a little bit. So if you could just scroll back up to the URL that Matthew's put there. And while perhaps people are asking questions and Stephen's replying to those, if you could please fill in the survey. What will happen is if you click on that, it's going to open up and you'll be able to do that at the same time. So thanks very much, and I'll hand the mic back to you, Stephen, because people might have some more questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Jeff. Look, Connie Price has asked about what unis are trialling this. At the moment, Griffith have been involved. Griffith Uni have been involved in quite a major trial last semester and this semester. Bond Uni are about to trial it this semester. I think Jeff, RMIT might be trialling it fairly soon as well, and I know that UQ are currently setting up a trial as well. So the most advanced trial is at Griffith. So you can certainly talk to me about that, and I can put you in contact, and particularly you, Connie, to people at Griffith to get their experience in using it. Okay, now, are there any other questions, particular questions people have? Oh, UNE has, various people at UNE have trialed it, but they're not running a trial at the moment. They're doing a trial of GradeMark at this point. But I hope that they will do the trial of the ReMarks version, because it's got a lot more features, and I think it's a lot better than GradeMark. But anyway, as I say, I've got my own views. Other questions? Do have a look at the ReMarks website, because there's a lot of information there, and as I say, you can download a version of it. And if you want information about the MarkPad, send me an email. Just send it to all lowercase. Well, you can see it on the screen, stephen.colbran@gmail.com, and I'll be able to send you screenshots in relation to that. It's quite an effective little program that will mark on an iPad and integrate back with ReMarks itself. Okay. How is feedback aggregated? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Across modules and across assignments. Okay, well, look, the way you could do that, generally ReMarks works on the basis of each assignment as you mark it. You might have a rubric that goes across multiple items, multiple assignments, but you have to mark each assignment individually. The marks then go up to the learning management system in the store there. Students would get back their annotations for each particular assignment. Whereas the feedback database, that's an enterprise database stored at the university. Okay, ReMarks is its own database, that's correct. Marking annotations I'll send back as a matter, that's right. So each type of database, each learning management system has its own database. And if you, for example, are a casual marker that works across multiple universities, then in fact you can see your marking across multiple universities. So there's a hardware setup needed at the uni for this. Yes, you have to install the building block in relation to Blackboard and the plug-in relation to Moodle on the administrator of the learning management system has to install that. That's one component. And then the other component of the software is installed on the desktop, on the actual individual's machine. So there's two components to it. The LMS component, building block or plug-in, and the other component which is on each individual machine. There's no different, you don't have to have any specialized hardware. It's just the normal hardware that you use in relation to your LMS or your hosting service users. How is setup of assignments done? Basically the same way you set up an assignment in your LMS. It's exactly the same process that you normally do in your in the case of Blackboard, and it's only marginally different in relation to Moodle. It's just listed as a different activity type. So it's just a standard process. Installation is dead easy. Okay. Are there any other questions that I've missed? It's sort of been flying past very quickly. If not, then I think we can wind it up, Jeff. So thanks everybody for participating.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stephen. I think we've worked you hard enough tonight. And thanks very much for your time. You've done a great job. And thanks everyone for participating tonight or today, wherever you are in the world. And Stephen, as he indicated, will be quite happy to do any follow-ups with anyone if you want some more information. And certainly I can recommend downloading it and having a go at it, because we've looked at RMIT here. It's still early days for us, but we've got a couple of people doing that, and I can certainly recommend trialling it. So again, Stephen, thanks very much. And just to remind everyone that there's more in the series for the webinars on the assessment. We're looking at all different aspects of the assessment, so we're trying to pick different topics that will be of interest to you, and you can see the program on the Transforming Assessment website. So thanks very much, and I think, Matthew, we could probably stop the recording here.